Because to play the Cuban, when I went down to Miami, a lot of Cubans that I met were saying I was skinny, flaca, flaca. So I had to gain weight. And
Hollywood's most quietly dangerous secret wasn't a scandal. It was a kindness. While others fought for the spotlight, Marisa Tomei built a jaw-dropping, almost banned legacy in the shadows, rewiring entire film sets with nothing but handwritten notes, midnight pep talks, and a presence so powerful even the most jaded crew members called her their anchor. But before she became the industry's emotional firewall, there was a moment that shocked the world. A moment Hollywood still can't explain. But long before the crew called her their anchor, before she became the one everyone wanted in their corner, there was a moment that shocked the world. She wasn't supposed to win that Oscar. She wasn't supposed to win that Oscar. What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most controversial Oscar wins wasn't just shocking? It sparked a conspiracy theory so persistent that the Academy itself had to issue an official denial. March 29, 1993. The 65th Academy Awards. Jack Palance steps to the microphone, opens the envelope, and announces Marisa Tomei as Best Supporting Actress for My Cousin Vinny. The audience gasps. The film industry collectively raises an eyebrow. And somewhere in that glittering auditorium, 4 British acting legends like Joan Plowright, Vanessa Redgrave, Miranda Richardson, and Judy Davis exchange glances that speak volumes. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody. A 28-year-old relative newcomer from Brooklyn, primarily known for a role on The Cosby Show spin-off A Different World, had just beaten 4 established, classically trained actresses nominated for serious dramatic roles. Tomei's performance as Mona Lisa Vito, the gum-smacking, car-obsessed hairdresser with a Brooklyn accent thick enough to spread on toast, was comedic gold. But comedy rarely gets Oscar recognition, especially not when competing against period dramas like Howard's End and Enchanted April. The shock was so profound it birthed one of Hollywood's most persistent myths, that Jack Palance had announced the wrong name. The whispers started in Manhattan, not far from Tomei's Brooklyn hometown. Maybe Palance was drunk. Maybe he was stoned. Maybe the 74-year-old actor couldn't read the teleprompter properly. Perhaps he'd simply read the last name that scrolled by, which happened to be Tomei's. Rumor suggests that the real winner was supposed to be Vanessa Redgrave. Still, the Academy was too embarrassed to correct the mistake on live television. Film critic Rex Reed became the conspiracy's most vocal champion, telling Geraldo Rivera in 1997 that Palance had probably been drunk or stoned when he proclaimed Tomei the winner. The story spread through Hollywood faster than free champagne at an after-party. But here's the kicker. The whole conspiracy falls apart under the slightest scrutiny. First, the footage clearly shows Palance reading from a card, not a teleprompter. Second, the winner's name isn't displayed on any teleprompter. It's only in the sealed envelope. And most damning to the conspiracy theorists, PricewaterhouseCoopers accountants stand offstage specifically to correct any such errors immediately. We saw this system in action during the infamous 2017 La La Land/Moonlight mix-up, when producers rushed on stage to correct the mistake. The Academy was so frustrated by the persistent rumor that they issued an official statement in 1994. So Marisa, stand assured that Oscar is adamantly yours, no matter what rumor may say to the contrary. Even Roger Ebert, angered by the allegations, personally got the Academy to issue a denial. Yet the myth persisted so much that Esquire named it one of the greatest celebrity conspiracy theories of all time. The rumor was powerful enough that Tomei herself had to address it repeatedly throughout her career, admitting in 2001 that was really hurtful at first. What makes this conspiracy theory particularly fascinating isn't just its persistence, but what it reveals about Hollywood's rigid hierarchy. The industry couldn't process that a young actress in a comedy could legitimately outshine established dramatic performers. The system needed no explanation other than the simplest one. Tomei's performance was just that good. Everyone I spoke to said, "Who is this woman? She's wonderful," recalled director Jonathan Lynn. Screenwriter Dale Launer was even more direct. "I remember speaking with her manager, and we both thought she was going to win. One, her performance is more emotionally satisfying, and two, everybody saw Vinny, and she popped in Vinny." Tomei herself eventually found humor in the situation. During her Saturday Night Live hosting gig, she joked about winning other awards she wasn't eligible for, all presented by Jack Palance. She went on to earn 2 more Oscar nominations, for In the Bedroom in 2001 and The Wrestler in 2008, silencing critics who questioned her talent. But what if this public controversy masked something even more interesting happening behind the scenes? While Hollywood insiders were busy questioning her win, what happened on the sets where Tomei worked? How did the crew members, the camera operators, the lighting technicians, and the makeup artists react to this supposedly undeserving actress? The truth about Marisa Tomei's real impact in Hollywood wasn't happening on stage at the Oscars. It was happening behind the cameras, where the real magic of filmmaking occurs. And that's where our story really begins. Marisa the Mood Lifter. What really happened on set? What if I told you the biggest impact Marisa Tomei made in Hollywood didn't happen in front of the camera? That her true power, the kind that leaves even jaded directors speechless, wasn't in a scene-stealing performance, but in a Tupperware container filled with homemade lasagna? No, this isn't some feel-good fluff piece. This is about what really went down behind the scenes. When the lights were off, the pressure was high, and the emotional temperature on set started to boil. Because, for the most part, what audiences don't see is the silent collapse of morale that happens between takes. Unless someone steps in. Someone like Marisa. We're not talking about diva behavior here. We're talking quiet revolutions. Imagine the chaos of a studio shoot running 3 hours behind schedule, the grips tense, the director fuming, and the leads retreating to their trailers in frustration. Then Marisa walks in, not with complaints or demands, but with food. Real food, hot, comforting, seasoned like it came from a nonna's kitchen in Brooklyn. Homemade pesto, ziti al forno, even matzo ball soup for the crew members who were nursing colds. And suddenly, something shifts. She changed the energy, one production assistant whispered years later. She didn't just bring food. She brought calm. It wasn't just the meals. She'd set up trivia games between shots, card tournaments, small birthday surprises for the gaffer's assistant. Nobody else knew by name. These weren't scripted gestures. They weren't image-driven. They were instinctual. You see, while other stars locked themselves in dressing rooms, method acting their way into exhaustion, Marisa was walking the soundstage, checking on the boom operator who hadn't sat down in 5 hours. That's not in the contract. That's not even in the union rules. But it was in her character. And it's easy to dismiss that kind of warmth as fluff, until you realize what it actually did. Because something strange kept happening on the sets where she worked. People didn't burn out. Tempers didn't flare. Crew loyalty was unnaturally high. From indie projects to high-stakes studio comedies, if Tomei was on set, things just worked better. Not always smoother, but better. There was a heart. So here's the real issue. Why isn't that part of her legacy more widely known? Why has this entire dimension of her influence been so casually buried beneath a single Oscar headline and a series of supporting roles? It's not your typical Hollywood tale. There's no meltdown, no power struggle. Just a woman operating with a kind of quiet emotional intelligence that executives couldn't quite quantify, so they ignored it. But the people on the ground? They never forgot. There was this one day on The Wrestler, a lighting tech once told a podcast, when the entire crew was wrecked. Darren Aronofsky was pushing for something moody and raw. It was freezing. We were behind schedule, and people were starting to lose it. And there's Marisa, holding the hand of an extra who just found out her dog died. Nobody told her. She just knew. And she stayed with that girl for 20 minutes while the rest of us were unraveling. That's not PR polish. That's something else. So, what is it? Is it empathy weaponized like a superpower? A coping mechanism from her childhood in Brooklyn, where warmth was survival? Or something more intuitive? Hard to say, but what's not hard to see is the pattern. The emotional scaffolding she built project after project, quietly, deliberately. A legacy not of flashy roles or headline moments, but of spaces transformed, tensions cooled, and people feeling just a little less disposable in a machine designed to chew them up. And don't think this was all sunshine and smiles. Tomei's kindness had teeth. If someone crossed a crew member, showed up drunk, or disrespected the script supervisor, she'd call them out privately, but firmly. She wasn't just the heart of the set. She was its emotional thermostat, keeping everything just warm enough to work. So now we ask the real question: why wasn't this ever front-page news? Because maybe it was never meant to be. Maybe Marisa Tomei's most powerful performances weren't on camera at all. But then, if that's true, what else have we missed about her? Turns out a lot. And in the next chapter, we're going back to the moment it all turned sideways, when an Oscar win triggered not praise but accusations, backroom whispers, and a theory so bold even insiders couldn't agree if it was a slip or a setup. You think you know what happened? Think again. The Spider-Woman surprise. What if I told you that one of the most unforgettable moments on the Spider-Man Homecoming set had nothing to do with web-slinging stunts, billion-dollar CGI, or Tom Holland doing backflips? That beneath the mask of Aunt May, yes, that Aunt May, stood a woman whose real power wasn't written into the script, but felt in the atmosphere? Because on a typical Thursday, when Marvel's machine was running like clockwork, and the unsung heroes, grips, gaffers, and lighting techs, were fading into the background as they always do, Marisa Tomei did something almost no one does in that world. She stopped everything. No warning, no agenda, no studio green light. She asked the assistant director to hold the role for 5 minutes. Then she called everyone to the center of the soundstage. Imagine the confusion. Cast in full costume. Crew with gear still strapped to their hips. A few eye rolls, sure. This isn't a yoga retreat, it's Marvel. Time is money, and delays are the stuff of studio nightmares. But then, calm and oddly radiant, Tomei stepped forward and did what Marvel's multi-million-dollar scripts never dared. She thanked the grip and lighting departments by name, not in a shallow shout-out to the crew kind of way. No, she pointed to the riggers balancing on scaffolding who'd been there since 4 a.m., and the light techs adjusting bounce boards to make her co-stars' jawlines pop. She mentioned the guy who silently rerouted the cable because someone tripped over it mid-scene, twice. Then, without warning, she started a circle. No script, no PR stunt, just Tomei, with that curious, almost mischievous energy she carries off-screen, asking everyone to go around and say one thing they appreciated about the crew that week. The result? A ripple of raw, unfiltered energy. Tom Holland chimed in about the electrician who kept checking in on his overheating suit. Zendaya, still half in character, teared up talking about how supported she felt on set, despite being the new girl. And for the most part, these are people who never get thanked on camera. That's interesting from a Hollywood behavioral lens, because in an industry where gratitude is often saved for Oscar podiums or Instagram captions, this kind of gesture, in the moment, unscripted, unpaid, was unheard of. One grip later told a reporter anonymously, "I've worked 20 years on sets and never seen anything like that. It actually made me want to do my job better." That's a hell of a result for a 5-minute pause. It makes you wonder how someone shifts the energy of a billion-dollar production without special effects or executive power. Simple. Presence. Not the kind you learn in acting school, but the kind that rewires a room. That's Marisa Tomei's superpower. And here's the kicker. This wasn't an isolated act. Because just a few weeks later, on a completely different set, under wildly different pressures, she would do something else. Not a thank you, not a circle, but something that had producers silently scrambling behind the scenes. Why? Next is where it gets controversial. She paid it forward quietly. While most celebrities were negotiating trailer square footage or fighting for top billing, Marisa Tomei was crouched behind a monitor, not for a scene, but to help a nervous costume intern sort fabric samples. No, this isn't some PR-polished anecdote. It's a pattern, a habit. While some actors clock out, the second cut is called, Tomei does the opposite. She lingers. Not in a way that draws attention, but in the quiet corners of set life where the real tension lives. Makeup trailers with 6 a.m. call times, wardrobe closets littered with pins and sweat, and back-of-house spaces where interns are learning to survive on 5 hours of sleep and too much coffee. She saw me struggling, said Lex, a former makeup assistant on a mid-budget indie that Tomei starred in back in 2016. I wasn't even assigned to her, but she watched me blend foundation on an extra and just stepped in. Not to scold, to teach, like teach. Walked me through undertones and sweat consistency under lights, and even gave me a mini pep talk about my technique. Lex didn't post it. No viral TikTok, no photos. But the experience is what is burned in memory. This wasn't an outlier. In fact, ask around, especially below-the-line folks who've worked more sets than they can count. And a weird trend appears. Tomei makes time for the people who don't make the headlines. There was this one day, recalled Dee, a costume intern on The Wrestler. I was terrified because I misidentified a stitching seam on a backup shirt for her character. I thought I was getting fired. Instead, she asked me to walk with her on break. I thought it was going to be a lecture. But she just talked about why texture matters on screen and why aging a shirt emotionally matters in method acting. Then she handed me a book on textile theory the next day. Let that sink in. A woman with an Oscar on her shelf is loaning books to interns. Not for clout, not to be seen, just because that's who she is. Most actors are nice, few are formational. And that's the Tomei paradox. Her extra isn't performative, it's habitual. No entourage, no photographer lurking conveniently nearby, just presence. For the most part, these stories don't make headlines because they don't explode. They simmer, in emails, in whispered gratitude, in the quiet power of someone who's been in the game for decades, but still remembers what it felt like to be unsure, invisible, and new. So yeah, maybe she never branded herself as a mentor. But if you ask the makeup assistants, costume runners, and production rookies she's crossed paths with, she was one anyway. But here's the thing. Generosity in private is easy when there's no pressure. What happens when everything becomes public? The wrestler's wounds went deeper. While Marisa Tomei was bearing her soul and body on screen in The Wrestler, she was also holding everyone else together behind it. Sounds impossible, right? Especially in a film that felt like it was bleeding out of every frame. Gritty, stripped, desperate. A story about broken men, broken systems, and yes, broken dreams. But that's the twist. While her character spiraled, Tomei was quietly saving the people around her. This was not your typical Hollywood production. Darren Aronofsky wasn't building comfort. He was chasing truth, raw, handheld, fluorescent-lit truth. And truth like that? It hurts. The days were long. Budgets were short, tempers shorter. The vibe on set often mirrored the film's own emotional weight. Vulnerable, bruised, and one bad day away from cracking. And yet, somehow, Tomei became the glue, the calm inside the emotional hurricane. People talk about Mickey Rourke's comeback, and yeah, it was powerful, said one gaffer who requested anonymity. But the heart? The real warmth? That came from Marisa. She was the one who checked in every single day, even on the days she had to strip herself bare in front of a full crew. Let that settle for a second. While executing one of her career's boldest, riskiest performances, one that earned her a third Oscar nomination, she was also leaving trail mix packets on the chairs of exhausted PAs, duct taping heat pads to the backs of grips, working double shifts, slipping handwritten notes into the makeup mirror of a tired intern who just read, "You're doing great. You're seen." Who does that? Tomei, apparently, and she never advertised it. No, this wasn't some strategic PR play or look at me moment. There were no cameras rolling when she handed out lavender oil vials to crew members pulling back-to-back 14-hour days. No press release when she called the assistant sound op at midnight. Not because anything was wrong, but because she sensed he needed someone to talk to. It felt maternal, but not in a pitying way, said the film's script supervisor. She didn't hover. She noticed. She paid attention to the small stuff. That's what got us through it. Here's the kicker. This was all happening while she was going through it, too. Playing Cassidy, the aging stripper whose world is crumbling just beneath the stage heels, wasn't just a role. It was a descent psychological excavation. And unlike the usual glamorous, polished characters Tomei had been associated with before, Cassidy was raw meat. She demanded vulnerability, physical exposure, emotional rot. The scenes weren't stylized. They were painful. And yet, between takes, Tomei didn't retreat. She'd check on the boom op, whose hands were trembling from the cold, or talk down a camera assistant who nearly broke down after a failed dolly move. Sometimes, she'd just stand in the corner, silent, and let her presence remind everyone, "You're not alone in this." It's easy to focus on the nudity, the pole dancing, the pain etched across her face. But the real story, the one no one tells, is how Tomei became something stronger than the character she played. The emotional backbone of a wounded, overworked set. She held the movie together in more ways than people realize, said a post-production editor. It wasn't just on screen, it was between the scenes, in the spaces no one thought to look. And maybe that's the duality that defines Tomei. Her gift is presence. On screen, it manifests as vulnerability, so honest it makes you wince. Off screen, it's a quiet power, steady, grounding, a force not advertised, but felt. So, while Cassidy danced to survive, Marisa stood still so others wouldn't fall. But here's the thing, when you're that emotionally dialed in, when you spend months absorbing pain that doesn't belong to you, it takes a toll. What happens when even the emotional backbone starts to bend? Why crew members fight to work with her? The real legends of Hollywood aren't always the ones whose names light up the marquee. Sometimes, the true icons are the ones whose legacy is whispered about in the shadows of the soundstage. The ones who inspire a silent collapse of egos and a jaw-dropping loyalty from those who work behind the scenes. No, this isn't some conspiracy theory. This is the untold story of why crew members fight to work with Marisa Tomei. For decades, the industry has been obsessed with stars, red carpets, magazine covers, and walking red flags of fame and scandal. But here's the issue. For the most part, the real heartbeat of a film set is the crew. The ones who know which actors are merely playing nice, and which ones are the real deal. And when you ask around, really ask, off the record, in the raw, unfiltered language of grips and gaffers, one name keeps coming up. Tomei. Not your typical forgotten manuscript of Hollywood history, but a quietly legendary figure whose off-camera reputation has been buried, suppressed, and actively rejected by the PR machines in favor of flashier headlines. But why? What makes her so different? What did she do to earn this almost mythic loyalty? Let's get into the strong points, straight from the mouths of those who've been there. She makes you feel like your work matters. That's not a line from a press release. That's a direct quote from a veteran camera operator, someone who's seen it all, from Oscar winners to walking red flags who treat the crew like wallpaper. With Tomei, you're not invisible. She remembers your name. She asks about your family. She actually listens. Another grip, who's worked on more sets than he can count, put it even more bluntly. Most actors, they're in their own world. Tomei, she's in the trenches with us. She'll wait in the rain, she'll crack a joke when the day's dragging, and she'll fight for a 5-minute break if she sees someone's about to collapse. That's rare. That's powerful. For centuries, or rather decades, Hollywood has tried to manufacture authenticity, to bottle that lightning of genuine connection. But the truth is finally coming to light. You can't fake what Tomei brings. It's not just about being nice. It's about a sense of urgency, a commitment to quality from the beginning, and a refusal to compromise on integrity. One longtime set decorator described her as the glue that holds the chaos together. She's the reason we push harder, stay later, and make the impossible happen. It makes you wonder how many so-called stars could inspire that kind of loyalty. And here's where it gets even more interesting from a scholarly point of view. Tomei's reputation isn't built on grand gestures or headline-grabbing stunts. It's the small things, the everyday acts of respect and recognition. She'll notice if you're having a rough day, says a lighting tech. She'll bring you coffee or just give you a look that says, "I see you." That's not normal. That's controversial. Way too dangerous for even the most image-obsessed publicists to spin because it's real. Does Tomei know the power she wields? If she doesn't deny it, is it because she understands that her legacy isn't about the roles she plays, but the lives she touches? That's interesting from a crew's point of view. She's the kind of person who makes you proud of what you do, says a sound mixer. She reminds you that everybody is the CEO of something, that quality always wins, and that work can be fun if you're working with the right people. No, this isn't just another Hollywood puff piece. This is a raw, unfiltered look at a legacy built off camera in the quiet moments when nobody's watching. It's about a woman who's become a legend, not because of what she does in front of the camera, but because of how she makes people feel behind it. But why has this story been so buried, so suppressed, so actively rejected by the machinery of celebrity culture? Why is Tomei's real legacy a legacy of respect, urgency, and joy, something the industry whispers about but rarely celebrates? What if I told you the answer is even more shocking than you think? The little extra that changed everything. What if I told you the most powerful thing Marisa Tomei ever did? The thing that changed careers, built loyalty, and carved a legacy had nothing to do with acting? No viral moment, no method role, no headline-grabbing scandal, just a little extra. A glance, a gesture, a level of care so subtle it rarely gets caught on camera. And yet, over time, it left a deeper mark than any blockbuster could. Let's rewind. When Tomei won the Oscar for My Cousin Vinny back in 1993, the public was split. Some cheered, others whispered. Accusations floated. Was it a fluke? A mistake? Even a technical error was rumored. And yet, while tabloids obsessed over that controversial win, something quieter, something infinitely more lasting, was happening behind the scenes. People weren't just working with Tomei. They were being transformed by her presence. A set designer on The Wrestler recalls a freezing night shoot in Jersey. Morale was low. People were snapping. Then, out of nowhere, Tomei brought hot drinks for the entire lighting crew. Not flashy, not posted to social. No assistant was carrying trays for her. She did it herself. "You don't forget that," he said. "No actor's ever done that for me before, or since." And here's the twist. She didn't do it to be remembered. That's what makes it land. She just does it. Call it a sixth sense, a superpower, a raw, unfiltered way of sensing when someone's unraveling and stitching them back together with kindness. Too poetic? Maybe. But it's echoed again and again. From makeup chairs to post-production lounges, crew members tell the same story. Tomei goes a little extra, not in performance, but in presence. She remembers your name. She knows your kids in rehab. She notices when your hands are shaking because you skipped lunch for the 4th day straight. And without making it about herself, she shows up in ways that aren't loud but are unforgettable. That's interesting from an industry-wide point of view, because, for the most part, actors are trained to shine under the spotlight. But Tomei? She radiates when no one's looking. And that's where the real emotional gravity sits. She never chased fame. She chased connections. Think about that. In a city wired to reward visibility, Tomei's legacy is built on what you don't see. It's built on hallway moments, whispered encouragements, and late-night check-ins with people most A-listers don't even look at. "She was the first one to ask me if I was okay," said a stunt coordinator who ruptured his shoulder mid-scene. Everyone else was talking about insurance. She was talking about pain. She got it. That little extra? It doesn't just comfort. It recalibrates. It says, you matter, even if no one else notices, and maybe that's the real point. For decades, fans have tried to decode Marisa Tomei, why she doesn't headline every franchise, why she drifts in and out of the limelight, and why Hollywood seems unsure how to categorize her. But maybe we've been asking the wrong questions. It's not that Tomei failed to rise to the top. It's that she quietly redefined what the top looks like. Legacy isn't always about being the loudest in the room. Sometimes it's about being the one who listens, really listens, when everyone else is too busy performing. And in that space, Tomei doesn't just exist, she dominates. Her Oscar may have come with controversy, but her impact came with clarity. That little extra, layered in kindness, buried in humility, repeated in moment after moment after moment, changed everything. This leads us to one final, jaw-dropping question. If she was this powerful off-screen, what did Hollywood try to hide about her on-screen? She didn't storm Hollywood with controversy. She disarmed it with grace. While others chased headlines, Tomei carved out a legacy in the shadows, one crew member, one gesture, one story at a time. And maybe that's why her name doesn't come up in the usual power rankings. She was never playing their game. She was rewriting the rules, quietly and intentionally. But here's the part no one expected. Her biggest career twist didn't come on set or behind the scenes. It happened the night her name was called on live television, when some claimed it had to be a mistake. Why were people so shocked she won? Drop your take in the comments, and we will see you in our next video.